Hello and welcome back to my scripting tutorial for Superfighters Deluxe. Today we'll be taking a look at classes. Classes are quite important to understand if you're making something advanced, so yeah, let's make a class and I will show you, explain everything as we go along. So to make a class you need to type class and then class name. The class name can be anything you want. It should describe what the class will be doing, and I will be doing some jumping crates as we did in a couple of tutorials back. So let's just have some crates on the map, like so. And let's all give them object ID jumping. Alright, and that's why I will also make the class name jumping. It doesn't need to be jumping, it could be whatever. And what even is a class? Well, class describes a set of properties for an object. In fact, it's very much the same as, for example, iObject. iObject is, if we hover on top of the thing, it says that it's a class. So that's basically what we'll be making. Well, if you think about what we need to make this crate jump, well, first we need to have the crate, so we'll make a variable of type iObject, because that's what the crate is. I'll just call it box, and as you can see we are not setting any value to it. That's because this scope actually isn't a function. As it says, it's a class. You can have the different properties and functions defined in classes, like this, pretty much the same way as you do outside of the class. For example, public void jump. Works just fine, and this function is can work with the variables defined inside the class, because as we talked about before, this box is declared in this scope and the function is also inside of this scope. So I can go into the jump function and do something to the box. But that's not what we need right now. Another important thing about classes are constructors, which you can make like so. You can also give them some parameters or not give them any parameters, doesn't really matter. But in this case I will hold them. I will need parameters here for the box, so let's make the parameter iObject or obj, for example. Okay, and so what we can do here is yeah, what's a constructor? Constructor is a special function of this class that will get called when we want to create a new jumping object. And how do we create a new jumping object? We simply type new jumping, like so. The compiler throws this error here because we didn't give the function any arguments, even though we said it needs them. So let's make an iObject here. Box is equal to game dot get object box, and put this object here. Okay, so this way we can get a box from the map, put it inside this jumping function, or in this case a constructor, and the constructor will run and do some things. Okay, if we had only one box here, this would work just fine. And in fact, let's make the box actually jump, so let's do box.set linear velocity and vector 0 10, and as you can see we have the new keyword before the vector, pretty much the same way as we do with the box, the jumping class. Oh, this should be actually OBG, because we actually don't need this right now, so let's get rid of it. Okay, so let's paste that in, and if we load in, the box jumps. Okay, we had it before, but now it's inside the class. What's the difference? Well, with classes you can easily make multiple things do the same thing. For example, let's have 4 boxes as we did before, right? So let's just paste them in. And instead of making a one new box, let's do for each iObject box. Oh, can't write now. Jig box in game dot get objects, and we want all the objects which have the custom ID of box, like so. Yeah, and all of the boxes do indeed jump. So just to kinda go through the code, we have a for each, and for everything on the map that's named box, we make a new jumping class, or to be more precise, we make a new instance of the jumping class and give it this parameter of a box, and the constructor makes the box jump. Okay, but we could have done that with a function, right? We could have just public void function, or let's do jump, for example, and it would also work the same way, like so. And I'm just going to copy this manually so we can see we don't need the class at all. Yeah, and it still works just fine. So why am I using a class here? Well, first I want to show you how classes works, but second, if we wanted to store some data in the box or do something a bit more advanced, it's really nicer to have it inside of a class. And that's why I had this iObject before. And we will store this object inside of the box variable inside the class so we can use it later. And let's, instead of doing the jump, we will instead create a let's do it actually using a timer. So let's get a timer real quick, or inside a normal layer like this, and repeat count 0 so it happens forever. And let's give it a script method of update like this, and we make a function here, public void update, and have trigger args here. Okay, and I will want to make, let's say, for a random box to jump. But how do I get the boxes that I need? Well, we need to store them in a list. So let's create a public static list of type jumping. Let's call it jumpings. Yeah, that makes sense. Why not? And okay. What's a static and what's a list, right? And what are these brackets? Well, static means that the variable actually exists only once, because in all other cases there is one variable per the instance of the class. And for example, here we have 4 jumping boxes, so we have 4 of these variables, but we will always have only one of the jumpings variable. Okay, makes sense. But what's a list? Well, it's similar to an array. That's the square brackets thing, right? But the advantage of list, it can you can easily add and remove things from the list. So for example, we can do in the constructor here jumpings at this. Okay, that didn't really help. You explained one thing and added another weird thing. Well, this keyword means refers to this instance of the class. So let's say this for each happens for the first time, and it finds this box. So the code creates a new box and adds this box, which we are working with right now, into the list. So just to make sure that works fine, let's do game show chat message and jumping.jumpings. We are using this dot here to tell, because the jumpings is inside of the jumping class, and we want count like this, and we want for it to be a string. Okay, and it says 4 in the chat because there are indeed 4 crates. Nice. Okay, let's get back to this update function. This function will get called every time this timer ticks, and that happens once every 1000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. And we want to select a random box and make a jump. So let's actually make a function inside of the jumpings class, because, well, we are making the jumping things jump. So let's have a static jump, for example. And also I forgot a data type, which is void, which means it doesn't return anything. Okay, I'm making the function static because I want to tell the class it should select the box for us, basically. Okay, as you can see, there is a red squiggly line. It says something. The function is inaccessible due to its protection level. What is a protection level? Well, that's this keyword right here, right? By default, things are private, and that's why they are inaccessible. They only can be accessed inside of the class. But for this function to work, we need to make it public. Why would you make anything private? Well, for example, let's say we don't want to use these jumpings outside, right? Anywhere. And right now, when I'm working with the jumping class, I might be like doing something, and I wanted to do random jump, but you can see also there is this jumping variable, but I don't want it for me, I don't want to have it in this list because I don't want to use it, right? So I will make it so it's not public, and this way it no longer shows in the list. It's also good practice to hide the variables which you don't use outside of the class. Okay, so the timer will take and call this random jump function, and the function will have to select a random box to make it jump. How does it do that? Well, we need a random. Let's make a static random, and it's a new random. Okay, that looks a bit weird. Why is it like that? Well, random is a class that creates random numbers. It's just something you need to get used to. If you need a random number, you need to create an instance of a class like this. Okay, and how do we pick a random box? Well, we have these jumpings, a list, right? And we can pick a random number. We will generate a next random number from a range of 0 to jumpings.count. Okay, and that will give us the whole class, and we need to get the box from that like this, and we will save it inside of the variable. We can call it box here, even though I will actually talk about it a little bit now, because that's quite a complicated bit of code. Let's actually start on... Well, first thing to explain is this function is static, right? And it cannot see these non-static variables because there are many of these variables, in this case 4 of them. So if we set just a box, it wouldn't know which one it is, so it doesn't actually know about them at all. That's why we are using this static list to access the boxes. And here you can see we are doing random.next that just picks a next random number. We actually don't need a 0 here at all. By default we start at 0, so it will tell us a random number between 0 and, in this case, 4. And actually, let's make it even a little bit more clear. Let's do let's do it this way. So it will give us a random class, random instance of this jumping class, which is in this variable here, and to make an object jump, we will have a box which will be jumping.box. We'll kinda take the jumping class and look at its box, right? And now we can do box dot set linear velocity new vector to 0, 10. Okay. I'll just kinda go through it all again. So at the start we get all the boxes from the map into the script, and we make a new instance of the jumping class for every box, and we remember the box for later. And whenever the timer ticks, we select a random box from that list, or rather a random jumping class from that list, and we will use its box and we will make the box jump. So let's see if that works. And nothing happens because I didn't set this to activate on startup. As you can see, the boxes are jumping randomly. This one didn't jump in. I wonder if it's broken or that's just how randomness works. Oh, it jumped out, so it works just fine. Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much it, what I wanted to show you about classes. They are a bit complicated, I have to say, but they are very helpful, especially when you are making something more complex. You could quite easily do this without a class, but once you are start to store some data, actually let's do something more complicated right away. For example, let's give every I'm not sure how to do this easily, but I guess we can do it not so easily anyway. So let's have a marker. Okay, this won't be a box anymore, it will be a... we will make them highlighted by using the activate trigger. So let's just copy a bunch of them here. Didn't do anything well. We will call these, I don't know, like jump active, for example, why not? And they will have a script method of jump. I'm not exactly sure what we'll be doing, but this seems like a great idea. So let's get all these jump triggers. So everything that's called jump active, we will put inside the jumping class. And let's make another variable inside, and it will be of type object activate trigger. And we will actually get it as the variable here. So okay, you see we have a red squiggly line here which says cannot convert from iObject to iObject active trigger. Well, we can solve this by casting it, but every time you cast something you need to understand that that means that you can have an error here, because if we had something named jump active and it wasn't activate trigger, the code would break. So we can just cast this here. It's not really a box. Let me rename this to like trigger, for example, so it's less confusing hopefully. And also let's get rid of these functions probably. Yeah, we don't need them anymore. Okay, so actually we might need this one, but just keep it like this, empty for now. Okay, so okay, you might be confused about what am I even doing, and what I want to do is to every time you activate the trigger, the box will like store a variable inside of it, and then every time this sticks, it will jump higher if you press it more times on the box, basically, right? So, well, we need that variable created, so integer jump height is equal to 0. And okay, we also need to actually get the box, because right now we are only getting the trigger, which is this thing, and this thing doesn't really jump. So how do we do that? We can simply take this, well, we can take a look in the documentation, honestly. It should be pretty straightforward. So let me just jump into the, oh boy. Ah, yeah, sorry about this. Okay. We have a object activate trigger here. And as you can see, it has this function get highlight object. And it gets the targeted object that should be highlighted. Okay, makes sense. And in all of these cases, the highlighted object is the box. So we will take this box variable and we will store the trigger dot get highlight object into it. So every trigger stores its box inside that variable. And okay, that's fine, but now we need to somehow make sure that the correct variable increases whenever the trigger gets pressed. And every single trigger is calling this jump function. So first thing, let's make that. Okay. So here we want to somehow find the right class which to increase its jump height. But how do we do that? Because every single one of them is calling the same method, the same script method. So we could obviously just go and make jump 1, jump 2, jump 3, jump 4, but that's just annoying and wrong. So instead we will look up the basically try to find this trigger and its box and, well, the class in which is the trigger. Okay, that sounded a bit complicated maybe, but we will use, instead of this list here, we will use a dictionary, which is similar to list, but it can contain a key and the value, and our key will be a, let's say this iObject activate trigger. You need the same thing here, and let's I will explain this in a little bit. Okay, so what we are doing, instead of a list we have a dictionary, and dictionary has kinda a key and a value. If you imagine an actual dictionary, like for translation, you have, let's say, a Chinese language and the English language, and if you want to look up some Chinese word, you look up the on one side there is the English word, and you look next to it and there is the Chinese word. Dictionary here in C# works basically the same. On one side we will have the trigger, which we've pressed, and we will look up and get the right jumping class, so we can easily increase its jump height. So let's actually make it all inside of the jumping class. So it's basically you want to put as many things inside of classes as you can, because that makes the code well, easier to read usually. So let's have a public static activate, for example. Also it needs the return type of void. And let's take as the argument the object activate trigger, for example, and we need to somehow call that function when we activate the trigger. We can simply do that by saying jumping dot activate, and we will again use the arguments here, args dot caller, to get this trigger. If we press the question mark again, it says that the caller is this object trigger, and which is this thing, right? So let me just cast it into a activate trigger. Sometimes when it's a good practice to make sure it is actually the correct type of object, but in this case, well, because I'm using it only here, it's kind of fine. But if you are making a script that can work on multiple maps, it's very good practice to have a if statement that actually checks if this is correct or not. So actually let's make it so you know what I'm talking about. Like this. Oops. And if this condition fails, we will say game dot show chat message not a activate trigger, like this. So let's just paste that in, nothing should really break, and let's get a button. And just to make sure it works, we will have this saying active trigger, for example. I'll just paste that in again. Okay, and we will also give the jump script method to this button. And when I press any of the activate triggers, it says in the chat activate trigger, right? But when I press the button, oh, the button actually is an activate trigger anyway. Well, that was a great, amazing example. So let's use area trigger instead of the button, and let's like put it right here and have its on leaf method jump. So when I press this, it still works just fine, but when I go through the area, then it says not a activate trigger, which is true because this is an area trigger and it's not an activate trigger. Okay, but in this case we really don't need it because I can keep the code there since I've already written it. But if you're making a map and a script like in the same file, basically, I'm like pasting the code right here, then you know what's happening in the map, so you kinda don't really need to do these checks, but it's a good practice anyway. So let me get rid of this chat message. And okay, so every time we press one of these triggers, this jumping activate function should happen, and we need to find the right instance of the jumping class in the dictionary. That's very easy to do. We'll just have the jumping class jumping is equal to jumpings. I should have named it something else. Actually, let me show you a cool feature. When you in Visual Studio, you double press Ctrl R like this. You can rename all the variables. For example, let's do dictionary. Okay, and in the dictionary we want to find this trigger, and the dictionary will tell us the jumping class that has this trigger inside of it. And let's say, just to make sure it works, let's just take the jumping box and set linear velocity to like new vector to 0, 10 again, for example. And as you can see, when I press the activate trigger, the box it's highlighting will jump, and I should quit before that happens. Okay. That's fun and all, but that's not what we want to do. So instead we will get the jump height, and as the Visual Studio knows I want, we'll do jump height plus 1. We can actually type this a little bit simpler. We can say plus equals to 1, which will just add 1 to the jump height. You can actually type it even simpler and do just plus plus, which is all of that was exactly identical. Okay, so this basically adds 1. That's nice. Now we want to do this update bit, so we will make another public static function. Jump all, for example, and here we will do for each jumping item in the dictionary, And as you can see, it's red because it cannot convert time generic key value pair whatever. Phew. Okay, what does that mean? It's because this is a dictionary, it actually contains two kinda things in it, right? Every single line of the dictionary has two things in it, the key and the value, and we only want the values, so we can do dot values, and now it's fine. So let's do item dot box dot set linear velocity, new vector tool, and to 0, and here we do jump height. We have to say item dot jump height. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. We get the box from the dictionary, we go through all the boxes, and we make them jump based on their jump height, which is stored in the variable, and which we can increase using the cliff trigger. Okay, last thing for us to do is call this method whenever the update gets called, and it obviously needs to be jumping dot. Okay, so, and instead of the timer, let's put it on a button so I can control it easier. Okay, so right now nothing happens. When I activate this box once, it jumps a little bit. Let's just do that a couple more times. Nice. Let's press it a couple more times on this box, and you see it jumps much higher because I pressed it way too many times. And let's press it a couple times here, and let's press it a little bit more, and let's press it a couple times here, and you see they all jump depending on how many times I made them jump. Okay, and that's basically everything. Oh, I can remove this random, we are no longer using it. So that's what are classes for. You don't really need them if you are making something simple, but if you have anything that stores some data, you should probably use a class. You also now should be able to use lists and dictionaries, hopefully, and that's it. If you have any requests for topics, feel free to leave a comment or message me on Discord, and I will take a look at that.